What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with the Phoenix comics as part of the current X-Men run in Marvel. And for those of you guys who are unfamiliar with what we're covering, as always, we will have a playlist at the end of this video so you can get caught up. But the long and short of this is that under Stephanie Phillips, the Phoenix comics are amazing. Man, let me tell you something. I love the Phoenix comics. It's phenomenal because I always love cosmic entities. And in effect, in the last video that we did, Jean Grey as the Phoenix Force had been killed by Gore the God Butcher. And it was kind of a crazy thing. And under normal circumstances, you would think that's not necessarily possible, but this is gonna be the beauty of the comic that we're covering now, because what it does is it sort of takes the idea of Jean and the idea of Phoenix and effectively combines them into one and sort of reconciles this history that's been around for all these years in Marvel. So what ends up happening is that in the aftermath of Jean Grey's death, she ends up meeting with the cosmic entity Eternity. Now, Eternity has a whole different look here, and I'm not necessarily against it. I do not recall in Jonathan Hickman's Gods if Eternity appeared. And if he didn't, then it would make sense now that Eternity has a different form. Because one of the things that Jonathan Hickman had done during Gods is he had given all the cosmic entities brand new forms. And we'll see what those new forms look like here in a second, because Stephanie Phillips builds on all of that. But Jean Grey is just kind of like, why am I here? Now, here's one of the things to know about Jean, specifically as having been the Phoenix over the years in Marvel. Because she's the White Phoenix of the Crown, or is basically the perfect host for the Phoenix Force, she knows the cosmic landscape in Marvel. So encountering a cosmic entity and talking to it is really no different than Jean Grey encountering like Cyclops and talking to him, or talking to Professor Xavier, or any of those guys, because by and large, she's on the same level as all of them, and even a little bit higher. And that's gonna be a kind of modification that Stephanie Phillips makes here, but she's gonna do it in a good way. Historically speaking in Marvel, for those of you guys who aren't familiar with the Phoenix, it represents the sum total of all life that has ever, currently does, or will ever exist throughout the entirety of not just the Marvel Universe, but the multiverse. So there's only really one Phoenix Force throughout the whole multiverse, in the same way there's only one living tribunal, but the Phoenix Force can break itself into pieces and basically put a portion of itself in every single universe that exists out there, which is why you have so many like what if stories, alternate reality stories, where Jean Grey's the Phoenix or someone else is the Phoenix or something along those lines. And so the result of this is that with Jean Grey being the White Phoenix of the Crown, she operates on a multiversal level using the totality of the Phoenix's power. So you can make a credible argument, she's way beyond Eternity. And that's why she's just so kind of cavalier and having a conversation with it, because she's like, did Gore kill me? Right? And that's why Eternity's like, that's why you are here, because you're thinking in terms of living and dying instead of becoming. Now, this is a really, really dope transition, because she asks, what are you talking about becoming? And Eternity says, the soul of all that is. And so at this point, Jean Grey's like, okay, fine, if you're gonna talk in riddles, then I'll just answer the question on my own, right? So I assume that my physical body is dead, but my mind came here, right? Some kind of psychic pocket of existence. Now, the reality here is she's probably in the far shore, right? The place beyond the entirety of the multiverse. For those of you guys who don't know what that means, and honestly, I'm working on an idea for a really, really amazing series that's gonna give you a tour of the entirety of the Marvel Universe and the multiverse. It's gonna feel like Cosmos from Neil deGrasse Tyson and probably look just as dope. But the far shore is effectively the place where cosmic entities meet, or the place that exists beyond everything. So in effect, once you get to the far shore, that's when you're getting into the territory of the one above all, right? The creator of all things in existence. One of the other cool things about this is the cosmic entities that we're gonna see a couple old faces that are now back in continuity in Marvel. You got, man, you guys are not ready. It's amazing. So what ends up happening is like with her being here, right, in this place, you know, she was like, what is it that I'm going to become, right? I'm already a Phoenix. I always have been. What more is there to become? And that's where Eternity says, I will show you. Now see. And he touches her head and shows her all the current cosmic entities that exist within the Marvel Universe. Now, one of these old faces that we haven't seen in a long time is the Fulcrum, and that is dope because the Fulcrum is just one of these guys, right? He appeared in like the old school Eternals comics in the mid 2000s as part of like the post House of M landscape. The idea was that when Celestials die, particularly when the Dreaming Celestial basically died, I think it was the Dreaming Celestial, Tiamat, when it died and then effectively gained sentience and like went to the realm of the Fulcrum, kind of this cosmic bar, because it was capable of making its own choices as opposed to operating based on its quote unquote programming as it was established in those Eternals comics, that the Fulcrum was like, you are the thing that I've been looking for. And so ultimately the two of them end up parting together. Now it has been highly theorized and never debunked by Marvel Comics that the Fulcrum is an aspect of the One Above All, or potentially the One Above All itself choosing to appear in a more tangible form. We don't know, right? Marvel's never really debunked it. They've never confirmed it. It's just one of those things. But here, you literally see the Fulcrum, the guy in blue, right, dancing with Mistress Death. What also kind of throws me off here, unless I missed something about Jonathan Hickman's Gods, is that you have like the In-Betweener with the horns on his head, but then you also have the In-Betweener as it appears alongside Oblivion. So I'm not really sure how they square this circle. Maybe I missed something, right? But you've also got like the new abstract form of the Living Tribunal. But the idea here is that all these cosmic entities exist in a kind of intertwining and even cosmic dance to a degree. And that's where, like, literally Eternity tells her, we have been watching you, the hero, Jean Grey, using the powers of the Phoenix Force to save sons, right past wrongs, help the smallest creatures in need of assistance. But you know you are more than that. Why are you holding back? Now, this is the coolest thing because technically, Jean Grey is, right? But what's really interesting about this, and this is one of those intriguing changes that Stephanie Phillips is making, she's making the cosmic entities more in line with what you and I would consider to be traditional superhero archetypes. In years past in Marvel, the cosmic entities were never that way, right? They were just these beings that sort of existed out there and were disconnected from humanity. Over the years, that's changed. What Stephanie Phillips is doing here is the end result of decades of stories having been written by other writers and so on and so forth that depict cosmic entities in a more human form, where they get involved in the goings-on of regular people and things like that. A good example of this is in the old Doctor Strange comics, when the Living Tribunal appeared for the very first time. That yes, the Tribunal referenced and said it operates on behalf of God and so on and so forth, but the fact is that the Tribunal appeared to Stephen Strange because Stephen Strange had made a deal to basically free the demon Zom in order to help him achieve a goal, or at least channel the power of Zom. The problem is that Zom was so astronomically powerful, no one could defeat Zom except for the Living Tribunal. So it was a really, really cool bit of segment there because the Tribunal stepped in that instance. But Eternity appearing in the events of like, the Infinity Gauntlet and so on and so forth, that they only ever showed up during like massive calamities on a cosmic scale. But the idea of them appearing here to Jean Grey is less, I think, to show that like the cosmic entities are coming down to the realm of mortal man, and instead elevating Jean Grey up to her level, right? Join me in the sky, I'm not coming down there to the ground. And so it's phenomenal because literally it says, we can feel it, the walls, the prison you have built within yourself. You came to the stars because you knew what you needed to become, but still you resist. Why? And she says, because I don't want to lose Jean Grey. And that right there is kind of the crux of the nature of Jean as the Phoenix, and Stephanie Phillips nails it in this comic, and it's amazing. When it comes to Jean Grey as a character in Marvel Comics, she's had the highest highs and the lowest lows, emotionally, mentally, as far as her powers go, her life in general, and she's died multiple times. But there's always been this kind of barrier that separates Jean from the Phoenix, that the Phoenix Force, until Jean would become like the white hot Phoenix of the Crown or something like that the Phoenix was more a power that she was using or a power that was using her. But it was never that they were kind of bonded perfectly in this kind of symbiotic relationship, one and the same, that you didn't know where the Phoenix ended and Jean Grey began. It happened for a very short period of time, and you could make a credible argument that even when Jean was calling herself Phoenix, that there was a kind of blending there, but there wasn't. Right? That wasn't really the case at all. And so ultimately, Eternity just kind of says, Jean Grey is an idea, and an idea cannot be lost once brought into existence. It may be changed, but not lost. If I let go and become what you suggest, what if I cannot control it? And that's kind of the base fear of Jean, and it always has been, ever since the era of the Dark Phoenix, when Jean Grey was tricked into believing that Cyclops had been killed by the Hellfire Club, and the Phoenix lost its mind. Now again, because of changes made by Jim Shooter and Chris Claremont and John Byrne and those guys at Marvel back in the old stories, right? The old 1980s post Dark Phoenix era, we ended up learning that the Phoenix Force was never actually in possession of Jean, that the Phoenix Force had cloned Jean. But the fact is, whether or not it was Jean or cloned her or whatever the case happened to be, possessed her, the basis here and the cornerstone behind all of this is that Jean's concern is that the Phoenix has the ability to go crazy. The Phoenix has the ability to lose its mind. And because Jean is using the Phoenix and the Phoenix is so powerful, she's always working to keep herself in check emotionally in order to ensure that her emotional state does not influence the Phoenix and drive the Phoenix to a state of madness. So that's where the question comes from. What if I can't control it? What if the Phoenix goes mad? What if I wipe out the universe? None of you would be able to stop me, save the living tribunal. But ultimately, Eternity is just kind of like, you can, right? And Jean's like, is it really just that simple? And Eternity says, to a being that does not exist as part of the very fabric of the universe, it would be exceedingly complicated, right? If you were just regular Jean Grey, yes, it would be beyond your ability to do. But you are the Phoenix. You said so yourself. And at the end of the day, the Phoenix does what it wants. It creates what it wants. There are no limits when it comes to the Phoenix Force. And so what this does, whether it's by the intention of Eternity or not, is it completes the connection between Jean Grey and the Phoenix, where she fully steps into the role with no fear whatsoever. There is no longer a barrier between Jean Grey and the Phoenix. There's not Jean and the Phoenix Force, it's Jean/Phoenix. In its totality, she lives up to her namesake. And the first thing she does when she comes back here is she's like, the Phoenix does not exist alone. There is a piece of you in every star, every planet, every being. You are creation. That's what she's told by Eternity. And so she resurrects herself, literally just comes back from the dead. And like Gore goes on the attack again. And ultimately, Jean just kind of has this amazing monologue where she says, Jean wanted to be a hero, the kind that stopped the bad guy before moving on to the next, to right her past wrongs, to follow in the footsteps of the heroes of Earth that she loved and admired. But that was the problem. Jean Grey was no longer a hero of Earth. And what she does, she literally seizes control of the all-black Necrosword and even the all-black itself and wipes it away, just disintegrates it. And the reality here, and this kind of gives you a sort of roundabout connection between like Jean and Null, like what would happen if Null the symbiote god fought Jean? She would obliterate him, because that's exactly what's happening here. The very essence of the All Black itself, it has no impact on Jean Grey, right? When you have Gore the God Butcher, is Gore on the same level as Null? I guess right now, probably yeah, because his heart is literally composed of the All Black. Null himself is a being of the All Black. And so while I wouldn't say their powers are identical, I would say in terms of their positions and what they're capable of, probably so. And Jean Grey's just kind of like, Jean was the most powerful person in the universe, and literally disintegrating the All Black in its totality. She says, I am not a god, Gore. You were mistaken. A god has limits. And literally wiping away the All Black and confining it down into Gore, she sends him into space. And it's just like, you've caused so much pain, but as a star, you will nourish an entire ecosystem of planets. She literally rematerializes Gore the God Butcher and turns him into a sun. Now, that right there puts her on the level of like Franklin Richards in terms of crazy displays of power. But in terms of like her role in the Pantheon, that's my question now. That's what I want to know, right? Is Jean Grey equal to Franklin Richards in terms of power? In terms of the things that we've seen Franklin Richards do, clearly not. This is a far grandiose display of power than I think anything that we've seen Franklin do outside of resurrecting a cosmic entity from the dead. But in terms of what Franklin could do as a universal shaper, a guy capable of literally warping the very fabric of the universe itself, honestly, I kind of want to see a fight between these two. I'm not gonna lie. Stephanie Phillips, if you see this video, make it happen. Please, for the love of God, make it happen. But that's when you switch back to the Galactic Council, right? Basically, the heads of these various empires that exist across the universe. Because remember, they were kind of brought together by Perrikus. Perrikus being a one-time Thor foe who's kind of graduated up and is working for a much bigger force. In effect, he's working for Thanos now, right? And he's doing what he can to kind of bring Thanos into the fold and give Thanos another stage with which to launch his campaign against the universe in Marvel. Literally, he says the Phoenix is incredibly dangerous here. And that's where everybody's just kind of like, did she really turn Gore the God Butcher into a star? Right? And that's where Gladiator kind of feeds on this, is like, is that the punishment you would have given Gore, right? To be turned into a star. The reality here is that as a Galactic Council, we have laws for a reason. There is structure and there is order. In effect, Phoenix is just a vigilante. She's running around the universe, taking the law into her own hands and punishing people in a way that she sees fit. She stands in the face of all order and all structure that has been created here. Right, wrong, or otherwise, this is how things work. Can we abide a force out there that will fly in the face of all we've done? The bigger issue here, though, is that with themselves as they are, they're powerless in the face of, they're the Galactic Council, right? They're politicians, right? By all standards of measurement, it would be like Franklin Richards on Earth showing up to Congress and Congress just shaking their big finger saying, you can't do that, Franklin. And Franklin would just be like, watch me, right? I mean, what are they going to do, right? Like, what are they going to do? And that's what you're talking about here on a cosmic level. As powerful as all of these guys are, lest we forget, Gladiator was part of the Annihilators, the most powerful group of superheroes to ever exist in the history of Marvel Comics, right? Gladiator, Silver Surfer, Beta Ray Bill. I mean, it was nuts. The team was ridiculously OP, but still, they cannot do anything in the face of the Phoenix. And that's why Perrikus is here. Because at the end of the day, Jean's like, I can hear you guys talking, just so you know. I have cosmic awareness. I know what's happening on a multiversal level. The reality here is I did what I did because at the end of the day, Gore the God Butcher had destroyed any semblance of what you and I would call humanity or empathy that he had left. He replaced himself with the very nature of the All Black. His heart was gone. The only way to deal with him was to turn him into a sun or something. Otherwise, he would have traveled the cosmos and wiped everything out of existence. And you would have been powerless to stop him. If anything, I did you a favor because while you'd be sitting around debating using your laws on what it is you should and shouldn't do, you'd be goose-stepping yourself into oblivion. But at the end of the day, they're just like, it doesn't matter, right? Like literally, Gladiator just kind of freaks out and just like destroys the observing disc or crystal or whatever it is. And it's just like, the Phoenix is coming for us, right? The Phoenix is coming here. Now, this is not normal of Gladiator, truth be told. Gladiator is normally sound and functional and reasonable, right? I mean, he'll make the tough calls and he'll wipe you out and think nothing about it if it means protecting his own race or potentially even the universe itself. It's not to say he doesn't get emotional, but Gladiator and them have no reason to believe the Phoenix would hunt them down and want to destroy them. So why in the world is he concerned about this? But that's when the Phoenix ends up coming across Adani. Now, Adani is kind of a continuation of an existing plot thread that's been happening over the course of the story so far, but in reality, it's kind of a background thing in the sense that at the very beginning of the story, before Jean Grey kind of became one with the Phoenix in this perfect symbiosis, that there was a black hole that was going to destroy, this whole area and so on. Jean Grey ended up basically trying to find a way to stop it, but pretty much all the people on Adani's planet died in the process. And Adani, being the only one left, has sworn vengeance against the Phoenix. Now, she was working with Perrikus at one point, and instead of Perrikus being reasonable and just kind of being like, hey, look, here's the whole situation as it unfolded, you have to see things from both sides. Instead of that level of rationality, he was like, yeah, man, Phoenix Force is a bad guy. She literally doomed your world. Like, don't you want to destroy her? Like, literally, that's what it was. It was him just manipulating this poor girl. But the kicker about this is that what Adani is wielding right now is essentially a psychic sword, a sword that feeds on psychic energy. And through that sword, that psychic energy permeates her. This story is all too familiar to Jean Grey because all the voices in this kind of sword, right? Like all this psychic reverberation, picking up on the sounds of all the people who were screaming out, not that dissimilar from Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars A New Hope, that it starts to influence Adani. Now, Jean Grey identifies with this because those of you guys who are familiar with Jean Grey's history in Marvel, you know that in the very early days, She had telepathy, but she couldn't control it. So she'd be overwhelmed by the voices of all the people that were around her, and even on a global scale. It got to the point where Professor Xavier had to basically block her telepathy from working in order to help keep her sane. And over time, those blocks were slowly removed until Jean was able to completely control her telepathy. And so ultimately, Jean just kind of like reaches out to Adani and like touches her, puts a mental block in place, and shuts the telepathy down in her own mind. Now, of course, Adani isn't really welcome to it, right? Her vengeance kind of overtakes things, and it's like, I appreciate you doing that for me, Jean, but like, I'm still gonna kill you, right? Like, it's kind of nuts. But that's when you switch over to Perrikus, right? And Perrikus says, "It is true. I am your only hope. I promise you a solution to the Phoenix problem, and I will deal with the Phoenix. But in exchange for my protection, Thanos will take over leadership of the Galactic Council." And that's where Thanos steps up and is like, that's exactly what's gonna happen. And for a start, then I'll decide what to do with my galaxy. So I gotta tell you guys, man, Stephanie Phillips is killing it when it comes to the Phoenix. I love this comic. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.